Yeah, hi everyone, Mr. Markwick here. Part of our next topic, which is indices and surds, involves simplifying surds. So that's the first thing I'm going to show you in this topic. And I'm going to go through today these four examples and how to simplify them using square factors. Now, what I mean by square factors, I'm talking about a square number that is a factor of the number underneath that square root sign. Just before I go through those examples though, let's actually look at what some square numbers are, maybe create a list of a few square numbers. So, what is a square number? You may already know, but a square number is the product of any number multiplied by itself, or any number squared. So, for example, 1 squared, or 1 times 1, is 1. So 1 is a square number. 2 squared, or 2 times 2, is 4. So 4 is a square number. 3 times 3, or 3 squared, is 9. 9 is a square number. 4 times 4, or 4 squared, is 16. So 16 is a square number. And you can see any number times by itself will result in what we call a square number. Okay? Now, I'm just going to write a little list here for the first 10 square numbers, and that will help us when we're looking for some square factors in these next few examples. So 9 squared is 81 and 10 squared is 100. So that's the first 10 square numbers right there. Okay, 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81 and 100. So when we're looking at simplifying these examples later, we're going to hopefully be using one of these square numbers. Okay? Now, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. Alternatively, or as an inverse operation, the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4, which is a square number, is 2. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4, etc. I'll quickly just go and fill this out. So what number multiplied by itself gives me 36? Well, it's 6 times 6. So 6 is the square root of 36. Okay, so using this list here, I'm going to simplify those 4 examples. In fact, what I might do before I choose one of those examples is I'm going to start with I'm going to start with, before I get to A, let's start with the square root of 12 and simplify that. It's a little bit smaller than 32. So simplifying the square root of 12. So the first thing you need to look for is a square factor of 12. Because 12 has a few factors, right? We could do 6 times 2. But 6 and 2 are not on this list of square numbers. So I need to find a factor that's a square number. And we want to try and avoid using 1 because that's not going to help us simplify it. So another factor of 12 is 4 times 3. And 4 is a square number, so that's a number we want to use. So I could write the square root of 12 as the square root of, sorry guys, bear with me, 4 times 3, or the square root of 4 times by the square root of 3. And we know that the square root of 4 is actually 2. So instead of writing the square root of 4, I could just write 2 times the square root of 3, or I could simplify that by getting rid of that multiplication sign and just writing 2 root 3. So the square root of 12 can be simplified to 2 root 3. Using the process of looking for a factor that is a square number. It's on this list. So why did I choose 4 times 3? Because 4 is a square number. Okay, I know 3 is not, so I can't actually simplify the square root of 3, but that's fine, it stays there. I have simplified the square root of 12 to 2 root 3. Let's use that process again with our first example here, which is the square root of 32. Excuse me. square root of 32. Now I need to find a square factor of 32. So a square factor is a number that comes, which is on this list here. So I could do 4 times 8, and I get to an answer. But in fact, a higher value is actually 16. 16 times 2. So I could do 32 is the same as the square root of 32 is the same as the square root of 16 times by 2, or the square root of 16 times by the square root of 2. And the square root of 16 we know can be written as 4. So 4 times square root of 2, or just 4 root 2. And that's it. I've simplified the square root of 32 to 4 root 2. I could have chosen 4 times by 8, but it would have meant that I would have had to simplify the square root of 8 even further, and I would have still got eventually to 4 root 2. What you want to try and do is try and find the highest square value, or sorry, square factor of that surd. In this case it was 16. That's the highest square factor. Okay? Second example there, or B, is 3 root 200. Now, this 3 is going to stay there. It means 3 times by root 200. What I want to do is simplify this part here. I want to simplify the root 200, the square root of 200. Again, I need to find a factor of 200 that is on this list. Okay, and there are a few there, but I want to look at, so for example, 25, 4 even, but I want to use the highest one possible, which is 100. Okay, so this could also be written as 3 times by the square root of 100 times by the square root of 2, because square root of 100 times square root of 2 is the square root of 200, so that's the factors I'm going to be using. Then we know that the square root of 100 can also be written as 10, so this becomes 3 times 10 times square root of 2. Now, 3 times 10 is 30, and the root 2 stays the same, so get rid of that multiplication sign, it's 30 root 2. Okay, the next couple of examples are a little bit trickier because they involve fractions, but it's the same sort of process, the same idea. We're looking for, again, square factors of the surd. So I don't know how well you can see that. I'll rewrite it here. So the question has 5 root 40 over 6. I'm just trying to simplify this square root here, the root 40. So 2 numbers that multiply to give me 40. One of them must be a square number. What are the 2 numbers I'm looking for? Okay, well, it's going to be 4, so the 5 stays there, times root 4 times root 10 over 6. And again, square root of 4 can be written as 2, so that becomes 5 times 2 times root 10 over 6. And then we can just multiply 5 by the 2, which gives me 10. Root 10 over 6. And that's pretty much it. You can then simplify this. Obviously, 10 and 6 are both divisible by 2. So if I divide 10 by 2, I'm left with 5. If I divide 6 by 2, I'm left with 3. So my final answer would actually be 5 root 10 over 3. Okay, and there you have it. That's the final answer. I can't simplify that square root of 10 any further, because even though I can divide 10 by 5 and 2, 5 and 2 are not square numbers. They don't appear on this list, so I can't simplify it any further. Okay? Alright, the last one there is square root of 75 over 9, which is the same as the square root of 75 over the square root of 9. Now, the square root of 9 is just 3, so I can actually, as my denominator, write that value 3. What I want to try and do now is to simplify this numerator, the square root of 75, using a square factor, from this list of square numbers. So what two numbers multiply to give me 75? One of them being a square number, well, it's 25 times by 3. Okay, and we know that square root of 25 can also be written as 5. So then I've got 5 root 3 over 3. And there you have it, simplified square root of 75 over 9 to 5 root 3 over 3. Now this is the first sort of thing that we're looking at in this topic, and this is really important, especially when you want to add and subtract surds. It's really important to be able to understand how to simplify those surds before you can add and subtract them. So hopefully this helps, and yeah, good luck. Thanks for watching.